How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm making a video about the A2 motorcycle license. The reason being, I've had quite a few people message me on my TikTok and also Instagram asking me what bike they should get, and some people just don't really have a general idea. I'm assuming they're people who haven't ridden bikes before and they don't know that you can buy a bigger bike and restrict it. So firstly, what is an A2 motorcycle license? Well, an A2 bike license, in the eyes of the DVLA, is still classed as a full motorcycle license. You're just limited on power. The max power output of a motorcycle on an A2 license is 47 brake horsepower or 35 kilowatts. You can do the A2 when you're 19 years old, but to do your A2 motorbike license you need a valid CBT, bear in mind that they only last 2 years, and you also need a valid motorcycle theory test, which again lasts for 2 years. So on your 19th birthday, providing you've got a CBT and a theory test done, you can go about doing your A2 license. But you're going to want a bit of riding experience before you do your A2. I'm not saying you have to have riding experience, but the trainers and the schools, they'll assume and prefer you to have a bit of riding experience before you get on a bike that can potentially have the power output of 47 horsepower. So I've had both a 47 horsepower stock bike, so a bike that you'd refer to as A2 compliant, something that doesn't need to be restricted, and I've also had a bike that's much more powerful than 47 horsepower and restricted it to 47 horsepower. So I once had a Honda CBR 650R, and they are at the top of the table as to what you can have in terms of power on an A2. So when it comes to the A2 license, you can't just buy any bike. The maximum power output of a bike you can have is 94 horsepower. The reason being, the UK laws state you're not allowed to restrict the bike more than 50% to meet the 47 horsepower. So if the bike was 100 horsepower, you're not allowed it. But because the CBR 650R is 94 horsepower, half of that is 47. On the other hand, you can go about buying a bike that's 47 horsepower or less. For instance, my good mate Max, shout out to you Max, I'll put a link to his channel down below in the description anyway. But Max himself, he's got a KTM Duke 390. He's selling it now anyway. I can't remember off the top of my head what the power is, but that is less than 47 horsepower, therefore he doesn't need to restrict it. And what do I mean by restriction? Well, if you've got a bike that's more than 47 but less than 94, there's three ways to restrict the bike. If they're older and they've got carbs, you basically get little washers that have got a smaller opening. I'm pretty sure the washers are fitted in between the intake trumpets and also the carbs themselves, so it basically limits how much air is getting into it, therefore reducing the power. The other option, which is what I did on my Honda CBR 650R, I installed a throttle restrictor. So it was a bit of a mission on that bike. I had to take the tank off and everything, but it's like a little plate that will stop the throttle being pulled back at 100%. You probably only get between a third and 50% throttle, which sounds pretty crap, but to be honest with you, it's still pretty ample. When you get on a bike for the first time, after you've passed your A2, and even with a throttle restrictor you're thinking, oh, it's going to be a bit naff, it's great fun, it is really good. So the other option is to get an ECU flash, so you've still got complete throttle control, there's no limitations there, but the bike is detuned electronically via an ECU flash to limit the power output of the bike. That's a more expensive option, unless you buy the bike new and they do it for you included in the price. I think the throttle restrictors are about anywhere from 50 to 70 quid, and then again for the carb bikes as well, the little washers are about, well, to be fair, I've seen some for about 67 quid as well, for like a Bandit or something like that. Shout out to LoJack! Big man LoJack off to the gym. What was I saying? So going back to what I said a minute ago, I have had both a CBR 500R and a CBR 650R. The 500R I didn't need to restrict. That was 47 horsepower out of the shop. If I compare the two, I'm a bit of a bigger guy. I'm about 6'1" with my boots on, and I'm 100 kilo. So I felt more comfortable on the bigger bike, which is a key thing here. A bigger CC typically correlates to a bigger bike in general. This is how it kind of usually goes. So the CBR 650R is heavier, it was slightly bigger obviously, and it was more premium. You pay a little bit more for them. However, the CBR 650R is heavier than the 500R. So now I'm talking about power to weight ratio, because at the end of the day, if you've just passed your A2, if you're anything like me, you want to get the fastest thing you possibly can. Without sounding like an idiot, you do. That's just how it goes. On paper, obviously the 650R is the faster bike, but if they're both tuned to 47 horsepower, if the bike's tuned to 47 horsepower and the 500R is 47 horsepower, you're thinking, what difference would there be? Well, the 500R is slightly lighter. Thinking about riding them both now, there is absolutely bugger all between them, and you can have a little bit more fun on the 500R because it's lighter, it's more nimble, and you've got 100% throttle. You can actually ride the bike for what it is. There's no limitations. You can go 100% throttle whenever you like. Whereas on the 650R, it's an inline 4. And the power band on that bike was from, I don't know, 8 to 9,000 RPM. But with the throttle restrictor, you kind of only get to use the torque. You get the third throttle, which is as far back as it will go, and then when it wants to take off, it won't because of the restrictor. So that's a bit of a bummer. It is a bit of a bummer. So my argument would be, two of my mates had MT-07s on their A2, Louis and Yayan. I've ridden them, brilliant bikes, especially when they're restricted as well, because they're a parallel twin. There's a lot of low down grunt and torque, so you get to use that torque even with a third throttle. That's why arguably a twin or something like that is going to be more fun on an A2 if you're going down the legal route and actually restricting it yourself. So what should you do is the question. You've got to ask yourself what you really want. You either want a motorcycle which is going to be slightly smaller in size, and obviously engine capacity will be smaller. That might be better on insurance for you compared to a bigger engine. You've also got to consider price. Obviously, typically a bigger motorcycle are usually more of a premium price, unless they're an older motorcycle like a Bandit or something. You can pick them up so cheap and they're still great bikes. They're so mass produced, there's parts available all the time, so on and so on. The main thing for me, this was the decider for me, as well as me being a bit of a bigger guy needing a bigger bike. The reason I went for a bike that you can restrict, or that has to be restricted I should say, is simply because after you've had your A2 license for 2 years, you can then upgrade to your direct access. So you don't just have to wait until you're 24 years old, because to do the direct access scheme you have to be 24 years old or have held your A2 license for 2 years. So let's say it's your 19th birthday, you do your A2 and you pass it a couple of weeks after. By the age of 21 you could be riding anything you like. I nearly said CBR then. I'm on a BMW S1000RR now. I'm 25, I've had it for a year. So I got this a little bit earlier because I was a bit stupid really. I timed mine badly. I should have just waited till I was 24, but it is what it is. I'm blabbering on now. My point being, at 21 years old you could be riding any bike you like because you've already held your A2 for 2 years. So going back to having a restricted bikes and the benefits of it, after those 2 years, all you've got to do is take off the throttle restrictor, the ECU restrictor, or take the washers out, and you've got a more powerful bike again. There's no reason for you to go and buy a different bike. If you've been riding an A2 compliant bike, which is only 47 horsepower, after 2 years you're going to want to upgrade. But you kind of get that sense of upgrading when you take your restrictor off. My CBR 650R, again being the perfect example, you get exactly twice the power. It doubles the power. So it went from 47 to 94, and it's going to feel like a completely different machine. So at the end of the day, it's simply down to personal preference. But coming from somebody who's had both A2 compliant and a restricted bikes for A2 regulations, me personally, I prefer getting a bike that you can restrict, simply because you don't then have to worry about selling the bike in 2 years when you want to upgrade. All you've got to do is take the restrictor off, which is going to be completely free anyway, and you've got a bike with more power. And another thing, you're already used to your bike by that point, and taking the restrictor off, this is going to sound really stupid, but I think you'll get what I mean. taking the restrictor off makes you not used to the bike anymore, and it kind of sparks the love for your bike again, because after a couple of years you're probably getting a little bit like, oh, I kind of want more power now, can't wait to do my direct access. And rather than faffing around having to list it on Facebook Marketplace or Auto Trader and getting yourself a new bike, as soon as you get home after you've passed and you've got that piece of paper in your hand saying you've got your direct access, you go home, take your restrictor kit off, and you've got a whole different beast altogether. And I think that's all part of the fun. It's a good progression to have. Imagine you're putting a stage 1 remap on your bike. It's brilliant, and it's free in theory. So I'm going to keep the video short and sweet. I hope it kind of answers mainly a lot of questions for those who've been asking me. I thought it was just easier to make a video. And for those who are genuinely interested, you live in the UK and you want to get your bike license and you're not 24 yet, do your A2. There's pros and cons to both. There's pros of having a bigger bike. You look cooler on a bigger bike. You got a bigger machine between your legs, which you know you can just de-restrict once you pass your DAS. But then having a smaller bike, you don't need to restrict. It's arguably cheaper on insurance, arguably better on fuel. You can use 100% of the throttle and use the whole bike. It's not limited. And there's so many great bikes now. They've made so many good A2 compliant bikes. You've got the R3, you've got the Duke 390, the list goes on. The sport bikes, naked bikes, there's even cruisers. You can even get a Harley that's like 1200cc, but because it's got less than 47 horsepower, you can ride it on an A2. Or let's say it's got less than 94 horsepower, you can restrict it and have a fucking 1200cc bike on an A2. It's crazy really, because obviously there's so much more torque bias than horsepower. But yeah, I really hope that answers some questions, guys. Let me know in the comments down below, if you've had your A2, what bike did you have? Was it a restricted bike or was it an A2 compliant already? And if you're looking to buy a bike, let me know what you want down below. I'll be interested to hear it. Hit that subscribe button, guys, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you soon. Peace.